The rain hammered down on the cracked pavement like bullets from the sky. Marcus pressed his back against the cold brick wall of the alley, his breath coming in short, painful gasps. Blood seeped through his fingers as he clutched his side, the warmth of it contrasting sharply with the icy water soaking through his clothes. He could hear footsteps echoing somewhere in the distance, getting closer. They were still looking for him. This wasn't how tonight was supposed to go. The deal had seemed legitimate, a simple exchange in a parking garage downtown. He'd done dozens of these transactions for his boss without incident. But somewhere between the handshake and the briefcase, everything had fallen apart. Guns drawn, shouting, chaos. Marcus had run, barely escaping with his life, but not before catching a bullet that now threatened to drain every ounce of strength from his body. The footsteps grew louder. Marcus tried to move deeper into the shadows, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. His vision blurred at the edges, darkness creeping in like a tide he couldn't fight. This was it, he thought. 28 years old and bleeding out in an alley that smelled like garbage and broken dreams. His mother would never know what happened to him. She'd wait by the phone, hoping for a call that would never come. Then he saw her. A figure appeared at the mouth of the alley, backlit by the dim street light beyond. For a moment, Marcus thought death had finally arrived to claim him, taking the form of a woman in a dark coat. But instead of walking past or running away screaming, she moved toward him with purpose. Her footsteps splashed through puddles with determination that cut through the sound of rain. "Don't move," she said, her voice calm but commanding. She knelt beside him, her hands already reaching for his wound before he could protest. In the faint light, he could see her face now. She was young, maybe his age, with sharp eyes that assessed his injury with the efficiency of someone who'd seen trauma before. "I need to get you out of here," she continued, pulling off her scarf and pressing it against his side. The pressure made him gasp, but she didn't apologize. "Those men who are looking for you, they'll circle back this way in about 3 minutes. Can you stand?" Marcus stared at her, confusion mixing with the pain. "Why are you helping me?" She ignored the question, instead looping his arm around her shoulders and hauling him to his feet with surprising strength. "There's a service entrance 2 buildings down. My car's parked there. Move." They stumbled through the rain together, Marcus leaning heavily on this stranger who'd appeared like an answer to a prayer he hadn't thought to say. Every step sent fresh waves of agony through his body, but her grip remained steady, unyielding. She half carried, half dragged him past dumpsters and fire escapes, her breathing controlled despite the effort. Behind them, voices shouted. The men had found the blood trail in the alley. Marcus felt panic surge through him, giving him a burst of adrenaline. His mysterious savior must have felt him tense because she picked up the pace, practically running now. They burst through a metal door she kicked open without breaking stride. A stairwell greeted them, and she guided him down 2 flights before emerging into an underground parking garage. True to her word, a sleek black sedan waited nearby, its lights flashing as she clicked a key fob. She shoved him into the passenger seat and sprinted around to the driver's side. The engine roared to life, and they were moving before Marcus could even process what was happening. The car climbed the exit ramp and merged into traffic with practiced ease, just another vehicle in the city's endless flow. Marcus turned to look at her, really look at her. In the glow of passing streetlights, he could see the sharp line of her jaw, the focused intensity in her eyes as she navigated the wet streets. She drove like someone familiar with running, with escape. "Who are you?" he managed to ask through the pain. She glanced at him briefly, then returned her attention to the road. "Someone who knows what it's like to need help and not get it," she said. "Now shut up and keep pressure on that wound. We're not out of this yet." The car wound through neighborhoods Marcus didn't recognize, each turn deliberate and calculated. His savior checked the rearview mirror constantly, her jaw set in concentration. Rain continued to sheet across the windshield, the wipers working overtime to maintain visibility. Marcus felt consciousness slipping away from him like sand through fingers, but every time his eyes started to close, she'd snap her fingers sharply. "Stay with me," she commanded. "Don't you dare check out now. We're almost there." Almost where, Marcus wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't form properly. His mouth tasted like copper, and the makeshift bandage she'd fashioned from her scarf was completely soaked through. He pressed harder, following her earlier instruction, though he wasn't sure it mattered anymore. The blood loss was making everything feel distant and dreamlike. They pulled into what appeared to be an abandoned industrial area, buildings with broken windows looming like hollow giants in the darkness. She drove around to the back of a warehouse and killed the engine. For a moment, they sat in silence except for the rain drumming on the roof and Marcus's labored breathing. "Can you walk?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. When he didn't respond, she got out and came around to his side, opening the door before he could fall out. Once again, she became his crutch, supporting weight that must have strained her shoulders and back. They entered through a side door she unlocked with a key she produced from her coat pocket. Inside, the warehouse was dark and cavernous, their footsteps echoing off concrete floors. But she navigated the space with familiarity, leading him past stacks of old crates and covered machinery until they reached a door hidden behind what looked like a broken forklift. Behind that door was something Marcus didn't expect, a fully furnished apartment, small but clean, with modern amenities that seemed completely out of place in this derelict building. She deposited him on a leather couch and immediately went to work, pulling out a large first aid kit that looked military grade. "Shirt off," she ordered, and Marcus complied as best he could with shaking hands. She helped him with the parts he couldn't manage, her touch professional and impersonal. When she saw the wound fully exposed, her expression tightened, but she didn't hesitate. What followed was the most excruciating 30 minutes of Marcus's life. She cleaned the wound with solutions that burned like fire, probed for the bullet with tools he couldn't name, and finally extracted the slug with a pair of surgical forceps. Marcus bit down on a leather strap she'd given him, his screams muffled but no less intense. "You're lucky," she said as she worked, her voice steady despite what she was doing. "It missed anything vital. Went clean through the muscle and out the back. You'll have a hell of a scar, but you'll live." She stitched him up with the precision of a surgeon, her hands never wavering. Marcus watched her face as she concentrated, noting the small scar above her left eyebrow, the way she chewed the inside of her cheek while she worked. When she finished, she applied bandages and gave him 2 pills with a glass of water. "Antibiotics and pain management," she explained. "Take them." Marcus swallowed them gratefully and fell back against the couch, exhausted beyond measure. The immediate crisis had passed, but 1,000 questions crowded his mind. He watched as she cleaned her tools and washed her hands in a small sink, her movements efficient and practiced. "You've done this before," he said. It wasn't a question. She dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him. "More times than I care to count." She crossed her arms and leaned against the counter, studying him with those intense eyes. "You're involved in something bad. I can tell by the way those men were hunting you, by the desperation in how you ran." Marcus couldn't deny it. Shame washed over him, mixing with the pain medication that was starting to take effect. "It's not what I wanted," he said quietly. "But sometimes life doesn't give you good choices." Something flickered across her face, an emotion quickly suppressed. "I know something about bad choices," she replied. "And about being trapped in situations that seem impossible to escape." She moved to a small kitchenette and started making coffee. The normalcy of the action seemed surreal given everything that had just happened. Marcus noticed details about the space now, a laptop on a desk, several phones lined up and charging, maps pinned to one wall with routes marked in red. This wasn't just a safe house. This was a base of operations. "What is this place?" he asked. "Who are you really?" She poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to him, sitting in a chair opposite the couch. For the first time since pulling him from that alley, she seemed to relax slightly, though her eyes remained alert. "My name is Elena," she said. "And this place is where I help people disappear." The coffee was strong and bitter, exactly what Marcus needed to fight through the fog in his head. He cradled the cup in both hands, letting the warmth seep into his fingers as he processed Elena's words. People who help others disappear existed in movies and novels, not in real life. Yet here he sat, stitched up and hidden away in a warehouse apartment that clearly served that exact purpose. "Disappear," he repeated, tasting the word. "You mean like witness protection?" Elena shook her head, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Nothing so official. Witness protection comes with rules, oversight, the constant possibility that someone in the system might be compromised. What I offer is simpler and more permanent. New identity, new location, new life. Clean break from whatever's chasing you." She set down her coffee and walked to the wall covered in maps. Her finger traced one of the red routes, following it from the city they were in now to somewhere in the rural Midwest. "I've moved 37 people in the last 3 years. Domestic abuse survivors, people who witnessed crimes they weren't supposed to see, individuals who got tangled up with the wrong organizations and needed out." Her finger stopped moving. "People like you." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. "Why?" he asked. "Why do you do this?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, her back still to him as she stared at the maps. When she finally spoke, her voice carried weight it hadn't before. Because 4 years ago, I needed to disappear, and no one helped me. I was running from a man who'd convinced me he loved me while slowly destroying everything I was. When I finally found the courage to leave, he hunted me like an animal. I had no money, no resources, no one to turn to. She turned to face him, and Marcus saw steel in her expression mixed with old pain. I survived by luck and desperation. I learned to forge documents, to move without leaving traces, to become invisible when I needed to be. And when I finally made it to safety, I realized I'd developed skills that others needed. Skills that could save lives. Marcus understood then. This wasn't charity or some misguided sense of adventure. This was personal. This was penance and purpose wrapped together. The people you help, do they pay you? Some do, when they can afford it. Others can't, so they don't. Money isn't why I do this. She returned to her chair, picking up her coffee again. But I need to know something before we go any further. What exactly are you running from? Who were those men? The question Marcus had been dreading. He could lie, minimize, make himself sound like an innocent victim of circumstance. But something about Elena's directness, her refusal to dress up hard truths, made him want to match her honesty. I work for Vincent Kowalski, he said, watching her face for recognition. He got it. Her eyes widened slightly. Everyone in the city knew that name, knew what it meant. I was his courier. Documents, money, sometimes packages I knew better than to open. Tonight was supposed to be a simple delivery, but the buyers brought cops with them. Undercover, setting up a sting. Elena's expression hardened. You're telling me I just saved someone who works for the biggest crime boss in 3 states? Worked, Marcus corrected. Past tense. The moment I ran, the moment I didn't get caught to keep my mouth shut, I became a liability to Vincent. Those men chasing me weren't cops, Elena. They were his cleanup crew. The silence that filled the room was heavy with implications. Marcus could see Elena calculating, weighing her principles against her mission. He'd worked for evil men doing evil things. Did that make him evil too? The question had haunted him for years, but he'd always pushed it away, telling himself he was just trying to survive. Tell me how you got involved with Kowalski, Elena said finally. So Marcus told her. He told her about his mother's medical bills after the cancer diagnosis, bills that insurance wouldn't cover and that minimum wage couldn't touch. He told her about the loan sharks who'd offered money at rates that seemed manageable until they weren't. He told her about Vincent's recruiter approaching him at his lowest point, offering a way out with the simple price of his integrity. I was 23, Marcus said, staring into his coffee. Desperate and stupid and convinced I could do it for just a little while, just until the debts were paid. But that's not how it works, is it? There's no quitting. There's no gold watch and thank you for your service. There's just deeper and deeper until you can't see daylight anymore. Elena listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When he finished, she stood and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain slightly to check the street below. Rain still fell, softer now but persistent. Your mother, she said without turning around. She's still alive? Yes. In a care facility across town. She has early onset Alzheimer's now, on top of everything else. Most days she doesn't know who I am. His voice cracked slightly. But I keep paying the bills. It's the only good thing I do. Elena let the curtain fall and faced him. If you disappear, those bills don't get paid. She gets moved to a state facility where the care is minimal at best. You understand that? Marcus had already thought of this, had thought of little else during the car ride here whenever consciousness threatened to slip away. It was the cage he couldn't escape, the chain that bound him to a life he hated. I know, he whispered. But if you don't disappear, Vincent's people will find you and kill you. Probably torture you first to make sure you haven't talked to anyone. Elena crossed her arms. So you have an impossible choice. Save yourself and abandon your mother, or stay and die trying to take care of someone who doesn't even remember you. Tears burned behind Marcus's eyes, but he refused to let them fall. There's no good answer. No, Elena agreed. There isn't. But maybe there's a third option. Marcus looked up sharply, hope and skepticism warring in his chest. Elena pulled her chair closer and sat down, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. The intensity in her eyes had shifted into something calculating, strategic. I've been watching Vincent Kowalski's operation for 6 months, she said quietly. One of the women I helped escape last year was connected to his organization. She told me things, gave me details about how he moves money, how he insulates himself from prosecution. I've been gathering information, building a case that could bring him down. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Why? What's your stake in this? Because men like Vincent don't just hurt the people who work for them. They poison entire communities. Every person I've helped run from this city, at least half were running from something connected to his empire. The drugs he moves, the violence he enables, the corruption he spreads through police and politicians. Elena's hands clenched into fists. He's a cancer, and I want him cut out. You're not a cop, Marcus said. You can't arrest him. No, but I can feed information to someone who can. I have a contact, an FBI agent who's been trying to build a RICO case against Vincent for 3 years. She's honest, incorruptible, and frustrated by how many times she's gotten close only to have witnesses disappear or evidence vanish. Elena's eyes bored into him. You could be the key she needs. Marcus's breath caught. You want me to testify? I want you to give them everything you know. Names, locations, operations, financial structures. You were his courier, Marcus. You've seen things, delivered things that could connect dots federal prosecutors have been trying to link for years. Elena's voice grew more urgent. With your testimony and the evidence I've compiled, we could actually do this. We could take him down. The magnitude of what she was suggesting crashed over Marcus like a wave. Testifying against Vincent Kowalski wasn't just dangerous, it was suicidal. People who crossed Vincent didn't just die. They disappeared in ways that left families wondering forever. His reach extended into police departments, courts, even federal facilities. He'd kill me, Marcus said flatly. Even in witness protection, eventually his people would find me. Not if he's in prison. Not if his entire organization is dismantled. Elena stood and began pacing, her mind clearly working through scenarios. The FBI would put you in legitimate witness protection during the trial. Afterward, I'd take over. Between official channels and my network, would make you truly disappear. New identity so deep that even Vincent's connections couldn't find you. And my mother? Elena stopped pacing. This was the crucial piece, Marcus knew. The linchpin that made everything else possible or impossible. The FBI has provisions for protecting family members of witnesses. They'd move her to a secure care facility, keep her safe throughout the trial. Afterward, would relocate her close to wherever you end up. You'd have a new name, a new life, but you could still visit her, still make sure she's cared for. Marcus wanted to believe it could work. He wanted it so badly his chest ached. But he'd lived in Vincent's world long enough to know how many ways plans fell apart, how easily promises became lies. You're asking me to bet my life and my mother's life on a lot of maybes. I'm asking you to do the right thing, Elena countered. I'm asking you to stop being a victim of circumstance and become someone who fights back. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, it could fail. But what's your alternative? Spend the rest of your short life running, looking over your shoulder, knowing Vincent will eventually find you? Or stay here and wait for his cleanup crew to finish what they started tonight? She was right, and Marcus hated that she was right. There were no safe options, no path that led to comfortable retirement and peaceful old age. Every road ahead was paved with risk and fear. The only question was whether he'd face that fear while trying to do something good or while continuing to be part of something evil. How long have you been planning this? He asked. Since the day Marie told me about Vincent's operation. She was a bookkeeper for one of his front companies, saw things she wasn't supposed to see. When she came to me, terrified and broken, I helped her disappear. But I kept her information, started investigating on my own. Elena pulled out her laptop and opened it, turning the screen toward Marcus. I've documented money laundering routes, identified key players, mapped his distribution network. But it's all circumstantial. What I need is someone from inside who can confirm these details, who can testify to first-hand knowledge. Marcus looked at the files on her screen, folders labeled with names he recognized, operations he'd participated in. The scope of her investigation was staggering. She'd been building a case that would take down not just Vincent but dozens of people in his organization. Judges, lawyers, cops, politicians, anyone on his payroll. If we do this, Marcus said slowly, if I agree to testify, how fast do we move? Tonight, Elena said without hesitation. My FBI contact can have a team here within 2 hours. They'll take your statement, move you and your mother to protective custody before dawn. By the time Vincent realizes you're not just missing but cooperating with federal agents, you'll be untouchable. He'll know you helped me. Elena smiled, but there was no humor in it. Let him know. I've been invisible for 4 years, Marcus. I'm very good at staying hidden. Besides, once Vincent's in custody and his organization is fractured, his reach diminishes considerably. People who feared him will suddenly remember their own self-interest. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed at him to refuse, to run, to find some other way. But he'd been running from the truth for 5 years, the truth that he'd sold his soul for money, that he'd enabled violence and suffering, that he'd become something his younger self would have despised. Maybe this was his chance at redemption. Maybe this was how he finally became the man his mother had raised him to be, before the bills and desperation had twisted him into something else. She wouldn't remember his choice, wouldn't understand what he'd done. But he would know. For the rest of his life, however long that might be, he would know he'd stood up when it mattered. He opened his eyes and met Elena's gaze. Make the call. Elena's fingers flew across her phone's keyboard while Marcus sat on the couch, his heart hammering against his ribs. The pain medication had dulled the physical agony in his side, but nothing could touch the fear coursing through his veins. He was about to cross a line from which there was no return, about to become the one thing Vincent Kowalski hated more than anything, a traitor. She's coming, Elena said, lowering her phone. Special Agent Rachel Morrison. She'll be here with the team in 90 minutes. They're coordinating pickup for your mother simultaneously. How do you know we can trust her? Because 3 years ago, when I was still learning how to help people disappear, I made a mistake. I used a forged document that had a traceable flaw. Agent Morrison caught it during an investigation into human trafficking. She tracked me down, and I thought my life was over. Elena's expression softened with memory. Instead, she sat me down and asked me what I was really doing. When I told her, she made a choice. She could arrest me for document fraud, or she could look the other way because the people I was helping were escaping legitimate danger. She looked the other way, Marcus said. She did more than that. She became a resource. When I need to move someone who's witnessed federal crimes, she facilitates. When she needs information about criminal organizations, I share what I learn from the people I help. It's not official, it's not sanctioned, but it works. Elena moved to the window again, her vigilance never quite dropping. Rachel Morrison is the kind of agent who joined the FBI because she actually believes in justice. They're rare, but they exist. Marcus wanted to believe in the existence of incorruptible people in positions of power. His years with Vincent had taught him that everyone had a price, that integrity was just a marketing term for people who hadn't been tested hard enough. But Elena had survived by trusting her instincts about people, and her instincts had led her to help him when she could have simply walked past that alley. Tell me what happens next, he said. All of it. I need to know what I'm walking into. Elena left the window and sat down, her voice taking on a teacher's cadence as she walked him through the process. Agent Morrison will arrive with a small team. They'll take your initial statement here, record everything you can remember about Vincent's operations. Then they'll transport you to a secure federal facility where you'll give a full deposition. That process will take days, maybe a week. You'll go through every detail of your 5 years working for Vincent. And my mother? Simultaneously, another team will go to her care facility. They'll explain to the staff that she's being moved for safety reasons, transfer her to a federal medical facility with expertise in Alzheimer's care. She'll be confused by the change, but she won't understand enough to be frightened. The facility will be secure, guarded, and you'll be allowed supervised visits. Marcus nodded, trying to absorb it all. What about after the trial? If Vincent's convicted? That's where things get interesting, Elena said. Official witness protection will give you a new identity, relocate you somewhere far from here. But their resources are limited, and their methods can be predictable if you know what to look for. That's where my help becomes crucial. She pulled out a folder from a drawer and handed it to Marcus. Inside were documents, a driver's license with his photo but a different name, a social security card, even a college transcript for a university he'd never attended. The name on everything was Michael Torres. This is your ghost life, Elena explained. Built layer by layer over the past 3 hours while you were unconscious. Michael Torres was born in Phoenix, moved to Oregon for college, works in tech support. He has a credit history, tax records, everything needed to be a real person. The FBI will give you their identity, but eventually, you'll transition to this one. Double insurance. Marcus stared at the documents, at the face that was his but somehow belonged to a stranger named Michael. This person had made different choices, lived a different life. This person was clean, unburdened by the weight of crimes and compromises. Could he become this person? Could he shed Marcus like a snake shedding skin and emerge as someone new? Your mother will be nearby, Elena continued. Not so close that patterns become obvious, but close enough that you can visit regularly. We'll establish you as a concerned nephew, which will explain the visits without raising questions. The facility will know the truth, but their records will reflect the cover story. How do you know all of this will work? Because I've done it before. Not at this scale, not with stakes this high, but the principles are the same. The key is patience and consistency. You don't make mistakes. You don't contact anyone from your old life. You become Michael Torres so completely that Marcus Holloway ceases to exist except in sealed federal records. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Elena checked her watch and relaxed slightly. She's early. She moved to the door and checked the peephole before opening it. Agent Rachel Morrison was not what Marcus expected. She was short, barely over 5 feet, with graying hair pulled into a practical bun. She wore a simple pantsuit and carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent decades earning respect in a male-dominated field. Behind her stood 2 other agents, both younger, both watchful. Elena, Morrison said warmly, then turned her attention to Marcus. Mr. Holloway. You've had quite a night. Marcus struggled to his feet, swaying slightly from the pain medication. Agent Morrison. Please, sit. You're injured and you're about to help me put away a man I've been chasing for longer than I care to admit. She pulled up a chair and sat across from him, her eyes sharp but kind. Before we begin the formal process, I need you to understand what you're agreeing to. Testifying against Vincent Kowalski will fundamentally change your life. You'll lose your name, your history, your ability to ever return to who you were. Is that something you're prepared to do? Marcus thought about his mother, who'd already lost her memories and would never know the sacrifice he was making. He thought about the people who'd suffered because of Vincent's drugs, the families destroyed by the violence Marcus had helped facilitate by carrying messages and money. He thought about the version of himself he saw in the mirror every morning, the disappointment in those eyes. I've been losing myself for 5 years, he said quietly. At least this way, the loss means something. Morrison smiled, and it transformed her face from stern to grandmotherly. Then let's get started. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of questions and recording equipment. Marcus told them everything: dates, names, locations, amounts, methods. He described Vincent's network in detail, explaining how the legitimate businesses laundered money, how the distribution network moved product, who the key players were and what roles they served. The other agents took notes furiously while Morrison guided the interview with questions that revealed years of investigative knowledge. When they finally finished the initial statement, dawn was breaking outside the warehouse windows. Morrison stood and stretched, her joints cracking audibly. We have enough to move forward. Mr. Holloway, we're going to transport you to a secure location now. Elena, thank you for your cooperation. I'll be in touch about the next phase, Elena said, and Morrison nodded understanding. The agents helped Marcus to his feet and began moving toward the door. He paused and turned back to Elena, this woman who'd saved his life for reasons he still didn't fully understand. Thank you, he said. I know you didn't do this for gratitude, but thank you. Elena shook her head. Don't thank me yet. The hard part's just beginning. Vincent won't go down easy, and the trial will drag you through hell. But when it's over, when you're Michael Torres living a quiet life in Oregon visiting your aunt who doesn't remember your name, then maybe we'll talk about thanks. Why did you really help me? Marcus asked. In that alley, you could have walked away. Elena was quiet for a moment, her expression distant. Because 4 years ago, someone did walk away. Several someones. And I almost died because people decided I wasn't worth the risk. I made a promise to myself that I'd never be that person, never look away when someone needed help. Her eyes focused back on him. You were bleeding out in an alley, and maybe you didn't deserve to be saved. Maybe you'd done terrible things that earned you that bullet. But everyone deserves a chance at redemption, Marcus. What you do with that chance is up to you. Agent Morrison touched Marcus's arm gently. We need to go. As they led him out of the warehouse and into an unmarked vehicle, Marcus looked back one last time. Elena stood in the doorway, backlit by the warehouse's dim interior lights, watching him leave. She raised one hand in a brief wave, then stepped back and closed the door. In that moment, Marcus understood something fundamental. She hadn't saved him expecting gratitude or even friendship. She'd saved him because saving people was who she'd become after losing herself. The car pulled away from the warehouse as the sun climbed higher, burning away the rain clouds and painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Marcus watched the city pass by through tinted windows, seeing it as if for the first time. Every street corner held memories of deliveries made, deals facilitated, lines crossed. But those memories belonged to someone named Marcus Holloway, and that person was dying. In his place, Michael Torres was being born. A man with no criminal history, no debts, no compromises. A man who'd done something brave and dangerous because it was the right thing to do. The transformation wouldn't be easy, and the fear would probably never fully leave him. But as they drove toward whatever came next, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Agent Morrison's phone buzzed, and she answered it quickly. Yes? Good. No complications? Excellent. She hung up and turned to Marcus with a smile. Your mother's been secured. She's safe, comfortable, and asking for pudding apparently. The staff at the new facility says she seems in good spirits. Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes, relief overwhelming him so completely he couldn't speak. His mother was safe. Whatever happened next, whatever price he paid for his testimony, she would be protected and cared for. That single fact made everything else bearable. Thank you, he managed to whisper. Morrison patted his hand. Save your thanks for when this is over. We've got a long road ahead, Mr. Holloway. Or should I start calling you Michael? Not yet, Marcus said, looking out at the city one last time. Let me be Marcus just a little while longer. Let me remember who I was so I never become him again. The car merged onto the highway, carrying him away from everything he'd known toward a future he couldn't predict. Behind him, in a warehouse apartment, Elena was already preparing for her next rescue. Ahead of him, months of depositions and trials waited, along with Vincent Kowalski's rage and the danger that came with it. But between the past he was leaving and the future he was creating stood this moment, this dawn, this chance. He hadn't asked Elena for thanks because he'd known instinctively that gratitude wasn't what she needed or wanted. She'd asked for something bigger, for him to take the help she offered and transform it into something meaningful, to become someone worthy of the risk she'd taken. That was the real gift, the true offering. Not just saving his life, but giving him the opportunity to save himself. As the city disappeared behind them and open road stretched ahead, Marcus closed his eyes and let himself imagine Michael Torres's life. A small apartment in Portland maybe, a job that paid honestly, weekly visits to see his aunt who smiled without recognition but smiled nonetheless. Simple things. Clean things. A life worth living. When he opened his eyes again, the sun had fully risen, and the world was bright with possibility. Vincent Kowalski's empire would fall. Marcus Holloway would disappear. And Michael Torres would walk into the light carrying the hard-earned knowledge that redemption wasn't given, it was fought for, bled for, and built one difficult choice at a time. That was what Elena had offered him in that alley. Not rescue, but revolution. Not safety, but the chance to become someone new. And he would spend the rest of his life proving he'd been worth saving.